Hello, and welcome to the Science of Psychotherapy podcast with Richard Hill. And today I am in conversation with two fabulous people from Austin in Texas. And friends of mine I've known for quite some time, Sue Marriott and Ann Kelley. Now, they are a true powerhouse couple who are based in Austin, Texas. They co-host the spectacular Therapist Uncensored podcast and co-authored this fabulous new book, Secure Relating, Holding Your Own in an Insecure World. Now, let's just hear a word about these two wonderful individuals. Now, Sue Marriott is a clinical social worker, educator, and podcaster who's worked with individuals and groups in private practice in Austin, Texas for over 30 years. She co-founded an organization that brings attachment and relational neurobiology to students, local therapists, and the public called Austin Interpersonal Neurobiology Connection, or as I remember it, In Connection, and served on the board of the Global Association for Interpersonal Neurobiology Studies, which is where we first met, a decade or more ago. Ann Kelley is a licensed psychologist who received her doctorate from the University of Texas in Austin. Her psychotherapy practice specializes in relational work. Now, her professional work and writing is motivated by her ongoing concern about the toxic strategies being used by media and political forces that provoke fear, anger, and polarization. I'm right with you. Now, I believe their book can make a real contribution in breaking that cycle and opening up hearts and minds to secure relating. So please enjoy this podcast wherever podcasts are distributed, and of course on our YouTube channel, The Science of Psychotherapy, and for our members of the Science of Psychotherapy Academy, you can go in and listen to this podcast and get some CEU points in the process. But now we're off to the US, to Austin in Texas, to talk to Sue Marriott and Ann Kelley. Welcome, both of you. It's so wonderful to have you here and joining me in this conversation.
Oh, yeah. We're so happy to be here, aren't we, Sue?
Totally, Richard. It's so good to see you again. It's been quite a while.
Yes, we did a lot of work. I mentioned in the introduction your participation in the GAINS, the Global Association of Interpersonal Neurobiology Studies. Not many people can say that rapidly.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's been a lot that you've done, and then you and Anne have done a lot together, not to mention creating a beautiful partnership and having wonderful kids. But maybe, Sue, if you could start with a bit of the longer history and talking about the Austin in Connection, bringing us up, and then, when you're ready, you could throw over to Anne to just bring us
Just
into
keep it
speed
going.
with the book. And,
Yeah.
and then I've got a bunch of things that I'm curious about, but you know what you're talking about. So just give us a
Well,
background,
well,
who you
I,
guys are and what you've been doing.
I won't make it long. Just for your listeners out there, that will be
Yeah.
efficient. But it was wonderful to meet you there. At the same time that was happening back then with Gaines, Austin, Texas had just this little renaissance of therapists that came together, and I was fortunate to be one of a pair, two of us. Uh, there was we basically sent out a little sound. It was like a little sounding, sound or whatever, and people started responding, and it was all about bringing the relational sciences and specifically interpersonal neurobiology to the public. And people came out of the woodwork. They loved it. An organization formed. We were doing a whole bunch of stuff, making it available to like I said, to the public, including in multiple languages and things like that, and non-traditional settings. So, and it still exists today, austininconnection.org. And as a matter of fact, they just put on a conference with us. It was really funny. It kind of full circle to come back from
That
being
was
founder
fun.
and board member to then, coming in. And part of the way that we framed it and do believe it is that they kind of raised, for me anyway, that organization and some of the boards I was on, Austin Group Psychotherapy Society, kind of raised me as a young clinician. And then through continuing partnerships and Ann and I's partnership, we kept growing this message of translating the complex science of attachment, which people think they understand, but often, oversimplify, and relational neuroscience, and making it usable and accessible. And so the podcast came out of that a bit, and that was Ann and my doing. And then the book kind of came from that. So, Ann, do you want to pick it out?
Yeah, I love what you said when you said that sometimes, attachment, et cetera, gets oversimplified. But it was also during that time that, the idea of trying to teach the neurobiology to regular people coming into your office was really kind of brand new. And we just shared in that passion of wanting to get this amazing science to the hands of people that can't walk into a therapy office. Maybe they can't afford it. They don't have access. Maybe they don't have interest. And it's been really thrilling to do the podcast we've been doing it, God, now 9 years. Long enough that we had
Yeah,
to teach people what a podcast was, remember?
totally. And now, it's over 10 million downloads. We're heard in almost every country. Top 10 Apple podcasts. I only mention that to say that people are really interested in the
Yeah.
subject. And that's been really important to us to make it accessible to, like you're saying, Ann, to folks who would never darken the halls of a therapy office, maybe due to cultural reasons or access or what have you. So
And
it's
that's how
exciting. So it's a wonderful privilege.
yeah, but also the interesting thing that we must, as therapists, we must not forget that people have been interpersonally, socially and with family and in a pastoral way, been resolving emotional and relational issues for thousands of years. We've also been doing it very badly because a lot of the problems that we have today, you can go back and find in the conversations of Socrates and Plato. And so we're still working on it. But I think it's the evolving of ideas and thinking. This feeling that once it's theorized and given a methodology, that then it becomes and has evidence base, as we talk about scientific base, that then we can stop. We've done it now. And what I love about this book, I mean, basically the beginning title, Secure Relating. So that, and we'll tease that out a little bit more, but particularly the subtitle, Holding Your Own. And I love this. I was talking about someone the other day. They were talking about being alone. I said, how about you think of it being on your own? Because holding our own in an insecure world. And this is another thing we'll tease out as we go along. But let's begin first with this work you've done, because I find what you're saying with attachment became oversimplified. I also found it getting overcomplicated as people started adding all these little tags and extra titles, and so secure attachment has a framework. It has something that we're trying to describe, but it occurs very naturally in people. And so therefore, there must be a way in which it can be resolved quite readily. And the main thing is having something that you can utilize, something that gives you, I mean, theory's great. And that's the other thing I love about the book is the descriptions of what you do, the expansion of it, and then a utilizable tool for therapists and for the average person. So perhaps that little bit, I mean, I think that first section of the book really is about the evolution or an evolutionary shift or a developmental framework of attachment. So who wants to jump in first and have a chat? We're pointing towards Anne. Off you go.
Yeah, I think the idea that it can easily unknowingly, we can think of attachment in the way that researchers researched it, right? We have to categorize people. We have to put people in boxes in order to understand differences, in order to make sense of how we're relating in the world and how we learn to protect and defend ourselves. And so it's such rich research that is still completely solid and relevant today. And yet we all know that none of us function in a box. None of us function one way. We're not preoccupied all the time. We don't fall in a dismissive attachment, and that's how we relate to everybody in our life at all times. And I think it was really important for Sue and I when we were approaching this book to be the book that we can hand for ourselves and hand to clients that can feel like it can be applied in your everyday life. And like, why is it in some relationships I can feel really solidly secure, and in other relationships I'm on the ceiling? It's so important to like take in the context that we're living in. And that's the reason why we landed on the insecure world. How often we are responding to the world. Gosh, we think of that deeply right now, I imagine. But the world activates our attachment system and our nervous system all the time.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it's that
yeah,
complex of, and that's one of the little notes I made in questioning is that it's never an either or. So someone's sort of saying,
right.
oh, it's an insecure world or it's an attachment. I mean, all these things are interplaying. But the degree to which, Sue, this idea of we get over bearing on ourselves and overwhelming ourselves with our own fault and blame problems, whereas there is definitely a clear and present danger outside of us. So, how did you work in this idea? And I know this is something that's very important to you. This disquiet that is caused by the outside world.
Well, absolutely. As Ann was saying, kind of this, we think of it as like a collective amygdala dysregulation that is sometimes intentional. You know what I mean? If the powers that be can keep us anxious and fearful, we're going to vote more, we're going to buy the product, we're going to do the thing. So we really want to help people outsmart their nervous system. We kind of talk about outsmarting their nervous system. And so that part's important. And then also what we didn't like, that some of the language, even thinking of insecure attachment, when you look at that culturally, and a lot of communities, what looks like insecure attachment is actually quite adaptive. And so we really wanted to kind of bring in cultural context we make the case in here that, there's the weird model, Western educated, industrial, rich, democratic, that almost all psychologists and people in the mental health field and the people that they study by, like, let's say it's something like 90%, it's something super high. I forget, it's in the book, but 90% are all that in that one group, but yet we only make up 15% of the world. And so then we're the ones defining what is healthy relating across the entire world. So we had a problem with that, and we wanted to really amplify some of these outside voices and got really excited, frankly, in talking to people that are out of that river of the, if you begin to look at, if you just think about your teachers and their teachers and their teachers, like it becomes in our universities, it gets narrower and narrower and narrower. It's a monolith, you know what I mean? And so it doesn't feel that way when you're in it. It feels normal, and it's only when something pops you out of it and you can look back that you can see how narrow the range is. And so we've just had such a great time meeting people and really working to expand the idea of work, indigenous work, just non-traditional psychotherapy, really, working more with nature, bottom-up processing in all these different ways, tantric, just so there's so many wisdom. There's so much wisdom in the world that gets left out because you have to have letters behind your name, because you have to have all these things that are intentionally designed to keep people out. And so that was kind of part of our idea of expanding the idea of attachment, updating it so that it includes all of the rich history, as Ann said, including the more recent stuff around attachment styles and how that relates to attachment categories. And then obviously, and I know this is a big love of yours, is the relational neuroscience and trying to make that, and Ann is really good at the spectrum and, really having a colorful model that makes it very easy to understand and then therefore hopefully to apply for people that want to just pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly for me one of the most fortunate things, and I didn't sort of strive for it, but I allowed myself to fall into it, and I became engaged with a social work group was based in India.
Oh,
Then there was that led to another group based in Bangladesh, and then another group in Nepal. And so I've had the good fortune to travel over there and spend some time. The great
Oh,
joy of
nice.
being in a conference where actually I'm the only pasty-faced person there, uh, and to listen to somebody talking about being a refugee who is a
Hmm.
refugee, to listen to a group of women talking about sex trafficking, who were sex trafficked. God, I tell you, it's one of the most emotional
Oh, yeah.
talks I've ever been to. But I think, Anne, when you're looking in America, to some extent, equally in a lot of Western countries, Australia, there are lots of opportunities to join in with these groups. And of course, my initial contact with these were in Australia, but then it took us over. So you can access the privilege of being able to observe and listen to all these groups. How easy or hard or available is that in your experience, and being able to enrich your understanding of being able to engage with people the way you talk about here?
I think it's been such a rich experience. And I think Sue and I would both agree that the process of writing this book wasn't taking our knowledge and putting it down on paper. It was an evolution of growth for us. And we learned probably more writing it by talking to people and bring people in and getting people's perspective and having them read. And I had so many enlightening aha experiences. And I could say out of it, I feel like I've learned how much I needed to unlearn. And there's been so many people open and generous and really encouraging of us asking questions and not being afraid to get it wrong and being able to get out of our box. And when one of our really important goals with our framework when we put it in is that it's not a model to go learn so that then you're certified in the Mars model. We're hoping and we have found that people can respond to this model and how it applies to them and their culture. What creates activation? When we talk about activation, we're not just talking about polyvagal activation, sympathetic and parasympathetic. How we use the spectrum specifically is more attachment activation. So when we get activated and our attachment system runs in a more preoccupied way, it can involve sympathetic activation. Um, but we see that as more the activation or the hyperactivation of the attachment system. And we call that red because it gets hot. And the other side of that is blue. And that is when we deactivate our attachment system. We may be hot and sympathetic and angry when we go over there, but our goal is to deactivate the connection and deactivate the attachment part, disconnect. And getting back to the cultural piece, it's like it's so important to get out of pathologizing. There are cultures that need to stay in a self-protected mode, whether that's kind of disconnected from the sense of the culture that's rejecting them, or watching for signs. And the fact that the thought that we would pathologize or to say you're in this category and it's because of early childhood caregiving was missing something really, really important. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts,
yeah.
Sue?
I mean,
yeah.
and can I add to that a little bit?
Oh
Yeah,
no,
Is
please
that
please.
do.
well, one of the things you said was, you going over there and kind of sitting at their knee and learning from them, which is
Yeah.
great because that more of that needs to happen. But what I found in a lot of these conversations was that we were getting people that were emerging from the more Western model and having to
Mm. Yes.
discover themselves and their own culture. And as a matter of fact, an interview I just did, this woman from the Caribbean, um, incredible conversation. But one of the things she was saying that she was so frustrated about was that she gets DEI scholarships, that she gets invited in, that she gets all of these things because she's Black and non-American, identifies in this way. But what doesn't happen is people coming to her and listening to her about what is her model. And then she said, on top of that, if and when they did, and because I said, even in the, I said, oh, tell us about the indigenous things and these Caribbean, like help us even know the stuff we're missing. And it was so sad because she was like, the truth is I'm very disconnected from it because all the training is all American training that we import. And so we end up drinking the Kool-Aid so much that it dilutes and dilutes and dilutes. And she sent me an email right after the conversation where she got something that said, hey, if you're interested in, and it was all these like Bowen theory and play therapy. And it was in her community about like, hey, let us know. And we're going to form this training group, play therapy training group. And it was all American work. So that was just an interesting perspective that it's actually been more about people trying to, they call it like reseasoning themselves or kind of getting out of the river and the Western model that we were all seeped in and finding their differences. And just one other thing I thought of when you were talking, Ann, was this thing about safety and insecurity. And like when you actually are being, attacked, when you actually are being persecuted, to look at the individual and to look at their symptoms is just part of the problem. It perpetuates the problem. And in particular, being based in Texas, our trans friends and our gender divergent friends and clients and family, they are literally being persecuted because people, they're being encouraged. Teachers and things are being encouraged to turn children in and turn families in if there's any kind of gender affirming care. It is so like the threat is actual, it's not real. So then if you look at somebody like that and then you're just like, oh, you're depressed. Well, or you have a history of depression. Like if you're just looking at the individual and you're not looking at the context that they're living in, or a person of color in a white community that is experiencing racism, and you're not acknowledging the violence and the systematic forces at play that keep you, all of the education and policing and all of the systems that serve to keep the status quo, which means keeping a lot of people out. Those are all systems that literally are creating, our nervous system is responding as it should, which is there's actual danger. And then if we interpret that as insecurity, or as, the problem is, oh, it's just that you're anxious. So let's together work on you and your anxiety instead of like, well, hell yes, you're anxious. Your people have been prosecuted. You're being prosecuted, So anyway, I don't mean to get on too much of a soapbox there, but
no, but do because it is important, and I talk about it quite a lot with from the framework of well, actually, the best thing is that I followed the beautiful quote from Anton Gaudi, the architect of the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. And it's down in his museum, and I found it when I went there 10 years ago, and they've actually made it more prominent. We were there a couple of months ago. And he said, originality consists of returning to the origin. And next to it was a fractal drawing of an oleander tree. And from that fractal drawing, he created one of his spires, which people were saying, oh, this is different and new and never been seen before. And he was basically there saying, yes, it has. I have just given it my newness. I have given it original. Right. And we've become so disconnected, so much so that we're trying to find ways back. I've just written an article in the magazine you might have seen, but we're talking about the sunsets may well have been the evolutionary stimulation for mindfulness. It's a place where you stop because you have no more light. You have an extraordinary experience, a numinous framework. You see how big and small you are. Then you join with the collective, with the social group. You eat and tell stories, and then you go to sleep. And we've lost touch. So much of what we do is what we've lost touch with. But as I say, we go back to Socrates and Plato talking about the same thing. Plato's allegory of the cave, Caesar, one of the Caesars was saying, just give them beer and circuses. I mean, which is sort of the Aldous Huxley Brave New World. And then, of course, we have the 1984, which is say just suppress them and make them scared and afraid, and all this discord and it's probably to do with population. So there's all these things going on, but fundamentally, how can we get a sense of ourselves? And we jumped ahead a little bit. We're talking about the red and the blue. Now this is the Mars little scheme. So can we go back and actually just say, okay, what does Mars stand for? And they're the extremes. What's the space in between? And just a little bit more about that sort of assessment tool or information or understanding tool is what I'd like to call it.
So it stands for the Modern Attachment Regulation Spectrum.
Oh, I
And
love
what
it.
Modern Attachment Regulation Spectrum. And again, the core of that is the spectrum. And we'd like to bring the spectrum back to what, we were talking about the sunset, to a moment and being aware of our moment and ourself. And the spectrum is to help us not just look at how did our history create our personality, but what is going on in our body right at this very moment and becoming more aware of it. And we all, because of our history, have developed more habituated patterns of responding. So we might, because of our history, end up, like we were mentioning before, needing to respond by keeping a watch on our environment and staying more in a preoccupied state. And that was red. And then I mentioned the blue. So what we talk about in the center of that spectrum is the core of secure relating. And that it's really important that it's not considered feeling secure. It is secure relating. It's being in touch with your mind and your body. It's being in touch with yourself, but also being able to remain in touch with other people. It's that rich place that we can be when we feel fairly safe in the world or safe in our body, even when the world may be activated. So it's so important that it's not, I feel secure, so therefore I'm in the green, because I could feel secure. And really what it is I'm completely cut off and confident and disregarding somebody else's opinion. And I feel quite confident, right, in myself. So that is, so it's always, if we can stop, and one of the cores of our framework is to stop for a moment and think about how your body is showing up and think about whether it's activated. And by spectrum gives you kind of ways of telling how you go up in activation, so that you're not waiting till you're kind of on the ceiling to recognize the signs that you're getting activated and then what is creating that activation. You have this way of meta looking, like what is creating this inside of me, instead of I'm just this preoccupied, insecure person. Wait, what's going on right now in my body, but what's also going on in this relationship right now? It's a mind-body awareness, and it's a chance for people to help ground themselves. Sue,
This
what
is
do you want to add? Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, because what I love about it is it's exactly that. It's a spectrum, which is what we always have to look at, this flow, this complexity.
Mhm.
But it's
I
not
mean, I
saying
mean,
you're a blue person or you're a green person or you're a red person, but
Right.
you're in a bluish experience at the moment. You're in
Right.
a reddish experience or you're in a greenish experience. And is that the way people can work with this tool? I'm imagining 10 people in a room having exactly the same contextual experience and all finding themselves in different parts of the spectrum. And that's the point of it, about the
that
difference that we do.
is, yeah, that's
Absolutely.
definitely the point, which is so that we're not worried about. It's very hard to switch somebody from insecure attachment to secure attachment. I mean, it's definitely possible. It happens. You don't have to know a thing about brain science to have that happen, right? Like it happens naturally when with the right experiences. But that is in therapy, or when as far as clinicians, it is a big job, and it is a labor intensive, expensive prospect that again not everybody has access to. But when
And
we
a
move,
discouraging process. It can be a very discouraging process if you think I learned that I'm preoccupied and I need to get to a secure attachment. That can feel like a big boulder to carry up a hill.
It's a lot
that's right.
to put on someone, isn't it? Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. But when we move though to looking at secure functioning,
Yeah.
and even if I have all kinds of trauma and history, and who knows what my AI or my AAP would look like, if I can learn the skills of secure functioning, my relationship, my partner is going to feel safer with me. I'm going to feel a little safer. So that I want to emphasize what y'all are both saying, which is that it's not blue, green, red. There's every color. I love the sunset. There's every color. And the beauty of it is it changes. It's dynamic. It's such a beautiful kind of overlay of this idea of the spectrum, so that as you're listening, that you can really, clients will say, like, I'm a little indigo, or,
Yeah.
I'm hot pink, or, and it becomes a fun, playful dynamic. Or even like, let's say if Ann's upset, if you don't mind my,
Go ahead.
using some
Go
of our
for it.
relationship, right? That, like, if I am thinking, oh, she's experiencing this big, partly because maybe her red sunglasses are on and it really is hitting her hard. She's not exaggerating. She's not manipulating. She's not being difficult. She's not being mean. You know what I mean? She really is like feeling something as a punch in the stomach or as a real assault, or even if I'm not seeing it that way. And to add to that, I might not be seeing it that way because I may have slid blue and be like shrugging and like, what? It's no big deal. I don't know what the big deal is, So it becomes interesting about what is it? Have I shifted where that I'm like just not engaged? And so she looks like she's on the ceiling, or am I a little bit more to the green? But I can have empathy of like, oh, she's feeling threat in her body. And what can I do to be safer to help bring her back to green? Either way, it's less shaming. It's more compassionate, and it gives you a lot of texture to work with in the moment.
Yeah,
The
I
less
just
shaming part's really important. I think people respond really, really big with that part. That it's relieving to go, oh wait, this is just my attachment
It's not me,
system
it's my
getting.
amygdala.
It's not me, it's my amygdala.
all of those things, but it is. I was just thinking that we're looking to find congruence with other
Yeah.
people, not convenience. Um, I don't need you to be in a particular state for me to be okay with you. We can both be not okay and go,
Right.
I am congruent with your not okayness and my not okayness. And of course, I think that's all balanced by what I'm now quite thoroughly convinced of in relation to complexity theory, is that given the opportunity and the circumstances, the system will move towards a better space. We'll move, I mean, and we'll move to a more healthy space, into a more resolved space. Otherwise,
Mm.
nothing would survive. And so, if I can find congruence, even when my wife she's Sue, even when we're in deep distress and disturbance, it's that just stopping and going, I'm obviously really in a bad space. And
Right.
Susie's obviously not in a good space either. If I can acknowledge that, I find we can stop. We can stop
Mhm.
the trying to compete or win or do all those sorts of
Right,
things.
right. Be right or explain or whatever.
Right.
And who was it? Oh gosh, the Gottmans have said it, and a few others. To understand how to be angry or to be disturbed, to be upset together. Uh,
Mhm.
and I can see this tool um, either utilizing it on initially, of course, when you see a new tool, you sort of have to bring it up, like reading music when you're playing a song. But eventually, you're able to put the technical thing aside, and it becomes an understanding. And this is why, as I said in the very beginning, I mean, I looked at it and I thought, yeah, that's what I've been trying to make sense of uh,
Mhm.
for
Oh,
myself.
that's so good.
Yeah, it was
That's
very
so good. And
exciting.
I like what you're saying,
Right.
even about this congruence of the idea is it's kind of like the window of tolerance, but a little different. Like
Mm.
that you can be in a green state of mind, as Anne was saying, you don't have to feel secure. As a matter of fact, you can be pretty upset. When you're managing that and when you keep your thinking on and you keep your heart in line, when you can stay connected to yourself and stay connected to the other person, you're still in the green zone. And so,
Right.
and the other thing that we like to say about the green zone is it also doesn't mean you're nice. Like, I think of for activists and stuff like that, this does not mean be a doormat. This does not mean be polite. This means be in charge of your own reaction and be tracking if you're being effective or not and being able to change your tact based on that. But it can be
Mhm.
very powerful. As a matter of fact, I think it's for sure the most powerful place where change comes from, whether it be, again, your partner, your kid, your boss, or the man. And, that the more that you can cultivate that really grounded, bold, strong, secure place, we just want to separate that out from thinking about it being warm or kind or calm or not. I mean, it can be those things too, but it's not required.
Yeah,
Right.
that sense that that safety and security, strangely, is more well-founded in with people who are adaptable and able to adjust without losing their frame or context. As you say, I can be as determined in my opinion and as clear in my opinion without getting angry and shouting and telling everybody they're stupid, and realizing that and which what would that would send if I'm sort of madly defending and pushing people away. What is that? What that put me in a blue or the red? That puts me in the red
Could be either.
zone, probably.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
could be either, right?
depending on the degree to which I'm being
Right, you're activating.
isolating myself from it. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And so
Right, because one way to tell if you're in the green in that example is so you're defending and you can be bold and you can have your opinions,
Mm-hmm.
but green zone would also mean that you're also listening and you're also still being impacted by the other
yeah,
person, and that you're reachable. You know what I mean?
yeah.
That people have access to you. You're not closed, and overpowering someone.
Isn't that it? I just dawning on me, of course, what this is telling me when I look at this spectrum and perhaps where I am making a reasonable guess of who I am, I'm also getting a sense of what's missing, uh,
Yeah,
Yes, that's
what I can try and turn up. Oh,
yeah.
I
that's
think
really cool. Oh, I'm learning. This is great.
I
Well,
think
us too, every day.
Richard, I think that is one of the most, I love that you said that because I think that's one of the most important points. But it's like, I think sometimes, people talk about being aware of your own emotional state. That's not new, right? We want to be aware and are we activated? I think where we want the spectrum to add depth is really understanding from attachment perspective why we do what we do and what we're missing when we do it. And that we often miss. We just think about calming down. But if we run in the blue, we may be walking around feeling calm all the time, right? And then what we think is the issue is the one hot over there on, like I said, Sue's example, right? If I'm up there and I'm angry and she's like, I'm sitting over here calm, you're the one activated. It's very obvious you're activated and I'm not, right? Talk to the hand. Um, that's not necessarily what she does. Not most
No,
of the
she
time.
doesn't do that. We're extrapolating. Yeah,
But what I'm saying is what we're hoping to draw insight is within ourselves. Why am I defending myself that way? Why is it when I get activated, I tend to cut off and become non-emotional and very intellectual and very focused on right and wrong and very focused on proving the facts, right? Like we don't talk
yeah,
about that as an activated defense. And that is the element of turning blue that we've learned being in our emotions isn't safe. And what we hope and what we've seen is that when people start to understand they're in the blue, they start to understand what they're missing in the green. Oh, I'm actually not connected to my emotions. And therefore I'm not
Or to the
connected
other
in my
person. Yeah.
relationship. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
missing the person. I'm pushing them away rather than just
So that I
reacting.
can look smart or be right or whatever the thing is.
well,
Yes. Yes.
this
Exactly.
Yes.
the book I wrote about that is this externalized framework,
Yeah.
Yeah.
called the winner-loser world, where right and wrong
Yeah.
and fault and blame, and we stop being
Yeah.
responsive. Now, I just thought of a couple of words that may be interesting. I thought of dis, relating, so disconnecting from relating, and
Yeah.
then the opposite of that is demand relating.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, interesting.
you have to relate to me because so, talk to the hand, and
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
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 that
Yeah. You
That's
have
really
to,
nice. I
you're
like both of
activated
those.
and you have to relate to me.
Disrelating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Disrelating
Disrelating,
and
demand relating. Yeah. Those are great words.
mm-hmm.
well, look, I'll
Mm-hmm.
quickly write them down.
Write them down.
This is the debate. Yeah, yeah,
We'll
yeah.
write them too. We'll write them too. We'll give you credit.
But isn't it
They're
beautiful
wonderful
that,
words.
but this evolving, and it's enriching. that I think you've done. Because in the book, if I can be so bold as to sort of uh, uh, give a framework to it, the first part I described as the journey of attachment theory. So you give it
Yes.
a journey and you explain where you don't just say, hey, I've got the best idea in the world. It's like, no, I've come from somewhere and I'm taking somewhere. The
Okay.
second part is the Mars, and it's looking at the describing the mechanism, describing the tool, the way you can use it. And the third part, which we've been sort of discussing, I describe as finding ourselves.
I find that a pretty
These
good
are the
wrap
ones.
up. I mean, I felt like you, as you kind of took us through it, I think that feels like you really are holding the essence of the last part of the book is taking all that you've learned. We like to say that you can, well, Sue likes to say a lot, you can skip that part and jump right to that part. And I'm like, no, 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 because I want you to get all of it. But it's really
Do
true
the front. Yeah,
because the last part is how do we apply this in our
yeah.
everyday lives? How does it look when we're walking and trying to relate to our friends? How does our defensive activation show up and why in relationships? And then how does it show up in, I think, the system Sue mentioned earlier about the fact that we kind of see our systems being intentionally hijacked, if not consciously, just through media and through fake news. And, and the more we know that the more we remained emotionally activated, then we are going to be in the further extremes of our spectrum. We're going to be pushed out because that's the way our body is designed to protect itself. And it's up to us to slow it down and go, I need to be able to securely relate to myself and to the people I care about. We like to say to our favorite people and our least favorite people, because that's our challenge right now. We're being pushed to disregard people, to dismiss people, to see them as crazy. And that if we did that in any of our romantic relationships or friends or with our friends, it would never last. So how do we imagine we can do that as a world? And so some of the core of what we're hoping for in the book is to send the message that secure relating and learning to do that and hold yourself while the world is activating us is probably the best way that we could find to be able to engage as a team on climate change, on racial disparity, and all these really important things that we need to be upset about, but we also need to be connected to ourselves and other people along the way to make a difference.
Beautiful. Sue, what can you do
Well,
for?
what I would just say, Richard, is I really appreciate you saying back to us what we said.
Yeah, me too.
There's, you know what I mean? When somebody can say back to you kind of what you said, and there's something really relieving and hopeful about that. So when you put it in your own words and you described it in your own way, it just made me really super happy. So thank you for doing that. Yeah, I thought it was
Mm-hmm.
wonderful.
My great pleasure. And I hope those things that I said are what some of the listeners of the podcast do say. And it's what we add. And I love in your last section, we talk about finding ourselves. Each section is headed by the word deepening. Um,
Mm.
and as an actor, I remember one of the things that we talked about some of these characters, and I was, how do I play this character? How do I give it reality? They were really not very much of a character. And this director said, you need to be deeply shallow. And
Mm.
that is kind of what has happened in this world. People are just living in this bit, but they're terribly
Yeah,
deep about it. They're
that is
deeply
Oh.
involved.
true. So much
Mm-hmm.
earnestness.
And when you go into the depth of it, that earnestness
Mm-hmm.
spreads out across
Well, and they don't know what they're missing. I mean,
It's
part of
so
the
true.
problem is, and the more activated that you are, the further you're out on the spectrum, the more black and white your thinking is, the more you're likely to believe conspiracy, especially about the other side. The more, you know what I mean? You're more prejudiced, you're more discriminating. And as you get more into the green zone, where, as you know, just to use our language that I imagine many of your listeners know, ventral vagal, oxytocin, social engagement system, all of that, we're more generous. We're able to tolerate difference. We can engage in conflict and like it's all the things that we need to happen, as Ann was saying, to have a cohesive society. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I got to be
So
annoying and have another word. We can undisrelate.
Or re-relate.
Yeah,
Re-relate.
Re-relate.
Because we need each other. We need each other and we need differences. I think the more I
That's
love the way you're
right.
putting that deeply shallow, because it's a beautiful statement because we feel so deeply and passionately because it's hitting our deepest values, but because we stay shallow in our nervous system and our reactivity,
Right. We're only
we
using a part of our brain. Yeah.
and part of our world. For
That's
climate
right.
change, we need each other and we need the differences. We don't need one political party in any part of the world. There's a reason, because that way we challenge each other to be our best selves and to think, oh, you see something I don't. Think of all the things you've seen in this you've mentioned in this podcast to us, reading some of the things that we wrote. That's like, oh, that's so wonderful. It's so enlightening.
All these things.
So it's whenever we stop and think we know best, and that's why we can scream the loudest, that's when we have to stop and go, okay, wait, am I actually in my secure relating space, or am I over there in my know-it-all activated, you're evil space?
Well, I'm going to, I'll see if I can find that director and tell him he was fabulous, had fabulous neuroscience behind his deeply shallow idea.
So wait, hold it. So it's disrelate, re-relate, and
Yeah, so
demand relate.
we had, yep,
and
that's
demand
right.
relate.
And demand, and re. Yeah, great.
That's fantastic.
Lovely little verbal
Love it. I
descriptions.
love it.
And for now,
Well, and also, Richard, I want to
yeah.
tell you how much I appreciate everything you've been doing in the community. You've been working for a long time to get this out there. Your newsletter and your journal is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
I cannot believe the depth. It must be so much work.
Oh.
And then you're doing a podcast on top of it. And then
Writing
you're
books.
authoring and writing books. It's incredible. So thank you for everything that you're doing. It's just really great.
Oh, that's lovely. That's just lovely. There's nothing more to say about that, and appreciate it. So, what a wonderful time! What a lovely, glorious, re-relating time we we had.
That's right. So can we tell people where to find us if they're interested?
Everything we'll have links, and we'll let you know, and we'll
Great.
let everybody know. And for now, though, we'll leave it to me to work together, and we'll put together. But everybody, I want you to pay attention to these gorgeous women, to the work they're doing. Get on to the Therapist Uncensored podcast. Add ours to theirs, or theirs to ours. Expand and deepen. And I just thank you two so much for giving me this time.
Oh, thank you for having us on.
Thank you, Richard.
It was really wonderful.
Bye for now.